Okay, hi and welcome everybody. Welcome to this event on vaccine policy and what a reputational approach can tell us about the EU's role in this field. My name's Eleanor Brooks. I'm a lecturer in health policy at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm going to be chairing the session today. So the seminar is part of a series. It's a series run by the EUHealthGov network. That's the research network for European Union health governance, which is funded by UACES, the University Association for Contemporary European Studies. And that network is coordinated by Dr. Mary Guy at Manchester University, by Dr. Charlotte Gorjewski at City University, and myself. And we are delighted and very grateful today to be joined by Dr. Thibaud Deruelle, who will talk to us in his presentation about the EU's role in vaccine policy. Thibaud is a senior researcher at the University of Lausanne, where he is working on the Synergia project, looking at the governance of personalised health, and he's also an adjunct professor at the Free University of Brussels. Thibaud's other research interests cover sort of public health and broader EU health governance and bureaucratic reputation, and it's this latter area that he's going to draw on particularly in his talk for us today. So I'll give the floor over to Thibaud in a second. Thibaud's going to present for about 20 minutes or so, and then he and I are going to engage in a bit of a discussion about his work and the things that he's presented. I'll then open the floor up to Q&A. We've got Charlotte and Mary who are kindly on the Twitter and collecting questions, so feel free to pop those in the chat box as we go through, and we'll see how we go in terms of calling on people. You can come on camera and mic if you like, or I can just do it over the chat, whatever people prefer, but feel free to post your questions in. We're using the EU health governance hashtag if anybody wants to engage on Twitter and interact with Mary there. And I think that's probably it in terms of introduction. So Thibaud, if you've got your slides ready to go, I'll hand over to you. See if those are coming up nicely. Wonderful. All right, so I give the floor to you, Thibaud, about 20 minutes or so.
All right, thank you very much for having me. It's always actually nice to come here, either as a member of the audience or as the presenter. And today I will talk to you about indeed vaccines, the emergence of the EU in the field of vaccination. And for this, I'm going to use a reputational approach, which I will detail in a minute. Here we go. So it's no news to anyone here. I think the EU has emerged as a key player in vaccination, or at the very least as a very visible player in vaccination. We've seen this especially throughout the year 2021, where sometimes you had the geopolitical narratives, including the EU about the vaccines and the access to vaccines. A lot of people outside the EU were talking about the EU, including in the UK. And this basically rising up to the occasion, rising up in front of the light as clear reputational risks, but also clear reputational gains for the EU. The key here is that the EU really has emerged in a market-related role, at least in the spotlight. This role was mainly purchasing. Sometimes it was heavily criticized, of course, but it was mainly related to the purchase of vaccines. What we will see today is that this is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg, and the role in vaccination has been actually behind the scenes much more important than this, and has been going on for far longer than expected. So the irony is that even though the EU has emerged as a key player, the EU only has, and I'm not sure this slide is useful to the audience we have, but I will go very fast on this, but we only have coordinating competence in public health in the EU. We have two scientific agencies that will be related to our narrative, our analysis on vaccines. The European Medicine Agency and the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. European Medicine Agency in charge of coordination of clinical trials, of green lighting medicines on the market. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control that is dealing with epidemiological intelligence and analysis. Finally, in the EU, we have one non-binding instrument, which is the joint procurement mechanism. So I went a bit fast on this, but I think it just sets up nicely the governance that we're talking about. So why a reputational approach? The goal here is to understand how the EU came to the forefront. So what is the role of reputation in the emergence of the EU in the field of vaccination? The reputational approach is something I used in my PhD thesis that was focused on the ECDC. I, like most PhD students, have a hard time to continue write my theoretical musings. And eventually, I think this has been working on vaccination has helped me to focus on that again and to try to reuse it and take it further. So just to give you the run-of-the-mill, reputation is usually described as a set of belief that observers, meaning the audience, hold some judgments that are made about an individual or an organization. Of course, we are here interested in organizations, and the conventional wisdom is that a good reputation is a source of value. With a good reputation, you can achieve many things. This was actually put forward by Carpenter, the American scholar who was evidently working on an American agency, vastly different from European agencies, with completely different stakes. So when Carpenter was actually working on the FDA, yes, that was very important to have a good reputation for the FDA in order to secure its regulatory dominion. So power, making yourself a role in a policy landscape was as simple as reputation building. When I say as simple, of course, I'm grossly underestimating this thing, but reputation building was key. For non-governmental organizations, I would say this is much more complicated because international organizations, do not have coercive powers and they lack financial resources. So just thinking in terms of, if an international organization builds a good reputation, then we're safe. The international organization is just going to be doing excellent work and everybody's going to be happy. Of course, this is not this is not as simple. What we see when we look at the EU and the idea of reputation is that reputation building is not sufficient. Simply because the EU is in a very complex system intertwined with member states' national systems, and therefore just thinking, well, if the EU does a good job at building reputation, then it will have a voice in vaccination. This is not that simple. So what we're looking for is a mechanisms that links reputational change and an increased role for the EU in the field of vaccination. For that, we need to operationalize reputation in a bit of a different way than what I just presented. We need to think about reputation simply as a type of information. To go a bit fast on this, just a type of information. And as any type of information, it's very helpful in making decisions. But information as such does not transform the social world, the real world, right? So when we look at reputation, we have to think about it in terms of information. The big question is, who engages with this information? This information will always tell you basically what audiences will want or will think the EU should do. Audiences in that case would be, of course, member states. It could be also public opinion, and we'll see public opinion will matter to a certain extent here, but it's mainly member states. It can be national governments. When I say member states, it can be also basically those national networks of public health experts. So why and who engages with social information? Well, maybe we could think of a power-hungry EU. However, we know that in public health, this is not exactly the case. Some people have even pointed out that the EU sometimes lack ambition. So it cannot be really, okay, the EU really wants this power, really wants to carve this role, therefore this is happening. No, the causal mechanism I'm talking about here has really to do with what we know from public policy. And as in most things in public policy, we start with the problem. So the whole point here that I'm making about social information, reputation, is simply that when there is a problem, the EU and actually the Commission might want to seize this problem, might want to try to solve this problem. If audiences actually have signaled that this is agreeable, this is appropriate, then congratulations. Most likely the Commission will manage to seize this role, to carve this new role in the landscape of communicable diseases, public health in general, I want to say. However, if there is no problem, you can build a reputation as much as you want. That's not going to work. If there is no audience that agrees with what you're doing or with your ambitions, this is not going to work. So really, it's about a problem, an agent, the Commission, that is really looking to link this problem to audiences' expectations. So this is what we're going to see today for the rest of this presentation. This mechanism that I just described happens twice over the last 20 years, 15 years. First with the H1N1 crisis, second with our COVID-19 crisis. But even before that, it starts, I want to say as usual, with a scientific network. Vaccines, unlike disease-specific networks there were plethora of them in the 80s and the 90s. Unlike those networks, unlike for those diseases, I want to say HIV, tuberculosis, there was no network that was purely about vaccines. This was changed in the mid-2000s with a call for tender that led to the creation of EUHealthGov net that was hosted in Denmark. This started to set up between 2003 and 2008 a scientific network. After that, this network was supposed to be financed directly by the ECDC to be eventually included in the ECDC. Therefore, vaccination was in the air. Vaccine preventable diseases were in the air, and the Commission and the ECDC thought that it could be interesting to develop some type of input. There was something very simple called, very simple but very efficient, but still very simple, childhood immunization schedule for children. Childhood immunization for children. Yeah, that's twice child. Anyway, even this, which would be basically a chart looking at all the vaccination schemes across the EU and trying to help us, I want to say, any parent who's moving across country to just know how to vaccinate their children, even this was already considered going a bit too far back then. And I have this quote here about from a representative of member states saying the CDC, I don't think my country needs to be reminded of vaccination. So really, really hard stance on this. So right before the H1N1 crisis, what we have is member states that are not too fond of the EU putting its nose in vaccination, and an EU that tried but actually failed. There was no specific problem, or maybe ill-defined problem. There was an agent that tried and didn't meet the expectations, the reputation. When H1N1 hits, things become very different. For a very simple reason, I just have to talk about the context really fast, because these are the kind of things we forget, thankfully. But when that happens, H1N1, it's been a few years that WHO, the Commission, the newly created ECDC, and also in the US, people are actually really afraid in public health environments, settings. They are really afraid of the next pandemic, which is something that we can relate to nowadays, I guess. They are very afraid. Why? Because there is the avian flu, H5N1, coming and going and always showing up at the doors of Europe and the US. We have lots of things going on and lots of preparedness going on. However, when that happens, H1N1, it's both really scary at the beginning, because suddenly it's also not coming from where we were expecting back then. It's coming actually from the Americas, not from Asia. There are many things that are unknown until the moment we realize that actually H1N1 is not that bad. And I think the fact that H1N1 was not that bad has strong explanatory power for lots of things that happened since then. But since H1N1 was not that bad, suddenly all those things that had been created by the Commission to actually deal with the situation and coordinate risk management vis-a-vis a crisis, those things, they don't really matter that much anymore. A lot of things are going to be discarded. And eventually, as we find a vaccine, and since not that many people will be vaccinated against H1N1, well, you know, member states are fine with the CDC and the Commission dealing with that. It's not an issue. And not just the ECDC and the Commission, also EMA. So we have this task force in 2009, 2010 that is dealing with vaccine development, vaccine strategies, joint procurement, communication to the public, support for third countries. All of those are documents, of course. We are in EU settings. Those are documents that hopefully will be used by member states. In effect, they are not really used by member states, but suddenly the glass ceiling has been shattered. Now the EU can talk about vaccines. No one really has a problem with it. So this is the first version of this mechanism, right? Suddenly, because of a change in conditions, social information has changed about the EU. I guess the EU can do that. This is what audiences are thinking. Building on this, then, the Commission and other institutions will be quite proactive. The Commission manages to actually, I want to say, squeeze out four texts from the Council, 3 texts from the Council and 1 text that is purely from the Commission. So the first one is on childhood immunization, showing that in 2011, that's it, the glass ceiling has been shattered. Now we can talk about childhood immunization. The network is integrated in the ECDC, the EUVAC network is integrated. The ECDC will likely support member states in setting up systems for monitoring vaccination programs. In effect, that doesn't work that much. In 2013, we continue to try to build on this. Since we can say something about the vaccines, maybe we can buy vaccines together. So this is the joint procurement that we've all heard about since then, and that was suggested by the task force during H1N1. In 2014, we started discussing vax hesitancy. This is very important. And in 2018, this is basically the best of all the measures I already discussed. Why the best of? Simply because if you've ever read a council recommendation, they invite member states to do X, Y, Z, but in effect, there was a lack of ambition on the side of member states, probably linked to the H1N1 story I was giving you. When COVID-19 happens, once again, it's the big bang for health threat management, for vaccination, for public health in general, and especially under the banner of this future European Health Union, which a lot of us have been discussing, I believe, and not everybody agree on what it should be or even on what it is at the moment. From the beginning, member states have shown interest in involving the EU in vaccination, which is crazy because a couple of years before, the Commission is calling for some actions to be taken by member states, and not so much is taken by member states. So to go a bit fast on this, but basically there will be a Commission strategy on 17 June 2020. The Commission strategy is already bringing a couple of interesting things, such as adapting the regulatory framework to speed it up. That's for EMA. And also securing the production of vaccines, which will be very, very important. And so from the beginning of the crisis, we can see that there is something to seize. Once again, member states' expectations have changed, and the Commission can opportunistically actually grab this. Okay, just a second. Procurement and reputational risks for the EU. As soon as the EU was basically put on the job, the Commission was put on the job regarding vaccines. The Commission started to have advanced purchase agreements This is a very short version of this story, but that might actually bring some memories. The global race was only beginning. There were some aggressive purchases at higher prices on the market. January and February were a bit crazy in that respect, really, in the way it sped up everything. We had some issues in the EU with AstraZeneca deliveries. Eventually, that was delivered 6 months too late, but that was delivered. And we had a slow rollout campaign in member states that was both due to sometimes the EU not able to deliver, but also member states kind of taking their time sometimes. And if we compare really rapidly to the UK case, I think member states in the EU didn't have the same challenge than the UK to try to prove that they could deal with themselves. And therefore, this is not the same motivator, that's for sure. And we saw that the numbers anyway after that are pretty much the same a couple of months later. We've had the Commission. Can you imagine? I started this talk saying, well, they don't have the right to talk about it. And 10 years later, the Commission is able to make a communication to tell member states, you got to speed up. You got to speed up the rollout. So that's quite interesting. Finally, we have a formal change in the role of the EU in medical countermeasures. I will go a bit fast on this. First of all, because I'm not a lawyer, and I'm pretty sure there are people who will be more eloquent than me on this. But basically, the idea is that at some point, the European Health Union, the project at least, has been twofold. There was the earlier action in 2020 with a bunch of proposals that was really about the governance of health threats and about bulking up agencies, wonderful things really. And there is Act 2, the sequel, where it's all about medical countermeasures. And that's just another way to say vaccines, to be honest. So Act 2 is all about vaccines, really, and it's all about the production. People realize that in the EU, there might be a problem with supply and the chain of production. I mean, there definitely was, at least at the very beginning. So we have a new council regulation and not decision. And we have the Health Emergency Response Authority, which a lot of you already know about, I'm pretty sure, but that is basically the arms of the proposal, the council regulation, how to actually have an institution within the Commission that will help the financing, that will gather the forces within the industry to actually produce vaccines. Very, very fast on this, combating vaccine hesitancy, really, really complicated, but still a job that the EU participates in. I don't think there's anything satisfying anyway when it comes to the EU or member states when it comes to combating vaccine hesitancy, but we can see that a lot of things have been going on, and this is really about the EU and its institutions maintaining a reputation of credibility. There are many problems, disinformation, such as disinformation on secondary effects. There were also problems with the number of doses, with conflicting information at global level and at European level. Finally, there was, I hope there was, and there isn't anymore, the attractiveness of the Sputnik vaccine in some countries, which really created also issues because the Sputnik vaccine does not work as well. So to finish on this reputational account of the EU's role in vaccination, we know that the role of reputation is threefold now. First, you need to signal that you're capable when you're the EU. That's before the H1N1 crisis. That's before the COVID-19 crisis. When there is an opportunity such as a crisis, you need to seize the opportunity. You need to be able to read the situation as the Commission and to try to take things further. If you go too far, it might actually blow back. Finally, you need to maintain this reputation as well, especially if you acquire some sort of authority amid a crisis. Once the crisis is done, you need to do a lot of efforts to maintaining it. And this is also something that we've seen between H1N1 and COVID-19. At the end of the day, reputation is not what changes things. Reputation is really social information that can be used by the Commission and that is produced by member states mostly. Finally, is it only a crisis thing? In this version, yes. So far, this is only a crisis thing when it comes to the EU. I think we can also look at other instances of well-defined public health problems that will actually take the EU somewhere. It doesn't have to be about vaccination. The thing is that if you talk about vaccination, it's unsurprising to have crises coming up because vaccine-preventable diseases, they can lead to pandemics. So there are a bunch of stuff that I still need to think about when it comes to the operationalization, of this specific framework. But I think it fits pretty well for the EU and the EU in public health, because we are in a complex context where sometimes competencies are not exactly clear. And I think reputation can really help to inform how we analyze those contexts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thibaud. That was really, really super. Some rounds of applause coming already from the audience. Thank you. That's nice. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but everybody else should feel free to pop those in the chat box. I'm happy to do the Q&A by sort of camera and mic if people would like to, but also we're recording. So if you're not comfortable with that, just stick your question in the chat and I'll gladly read it out. But to get us started, so Thibaud, thanks so much. Mostly what's flying around my brain is how well this fits with our sort of traditional narrative of health policy and how it comes about via the market and these sort of technical areas where the EU can sort of lay some groundwork and then build on. So there's lots to unpick here. But I wanted to start with something really practical. So we're talking about this increased role for the EU, and I'll get on to what we mean by the EU in a second. But what does it mean vis-a-vis member state coordination? So how is this increased role affecting the extent to which member states work together on vaccination policy?
So there are two ways to answer this. The real way, like the real impact is clear, but it's also like anything happening during a crisis, causality is a bit complex because things a bit happen at the same time. Since the role of the Commission is, and now of most agencies, by the way, since they've changed the mandates, the role of the Commission and agency is to help to coordinate. Incite coordination even. So the stronger is the role of the EU in vaccination, and the stronger coordination you can expect. It's not going to work every time, but you can expect, because this is really about appropriateness. The legal text didn't need to change that much, even though I talked about it. You didn't need to change that much. It's really about what is appropriate.
Okay, so we're not so much talking about sort of a zero-sum game where because the EU takes a greater role, member states take a lesser role. We're talking more about strengthened EU role, meaning more coordination that then feeds down international level. Gotcha. Right. Okay.
If I can just precise something. The EU is always about giving turnkey solutions in public health. That's all they do. They give you a turnkey solution, maybe often actually a couple of options, and then you can coordinate. So it's not that benign, but it's also not that much at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. So we're talking about structures like the Health Security Committee and these sorts of things starting to address issues around vaccine policy, whereas where they didn't do before, as opposed to member states taking less of a role and the Commission taking more of a role. Okay. I wanted to ask a little bit about, because we talked about the EU in vaccine policy, and it's not a unitary actor. So can you explain a little bit or reflect a little bit on how this works between individual institutions? So is it just the Commission that's trying to build reputation? Is it the agencies that are trying to build reputation? Is it even individual people, individual officials within those institutions whose reputation matters? And is there any conflict between, say, the ECDC building its reputation and the Commission doing so at the same time? Like, do those things always work in harmony, or does that create difficulty between them?
So this is a very complex question. It's the idea of aggregation of reputation, aggregation of this social information. No one would ask this about, let's say, the Council of Europe, right? But people don't ask much about the Council of Europe in general. That's perhaps the problem. But more seriously, they wouldn't ask this about the Council of Europe, despite the fact that you have actually a couple of agencies within or services that are distinct, such as the Venice Commission or the Assembly within it. So this is the eternal question of unitary actor or not. yes, there is a whole strain of reputation studies that is about agencies in particular. I would say in the version I'm giving right now, and since it's very much a work in progress, it's definitely not satisfying, but in the version I'm giving right now, the actor, the agent is the Commission. Yes, it's the Commission. However, the reputation is for the EU. First of all, because very often it's just about this thing. It's the EU, right? And when the EU is criticized, and I'm the first one to say, especially to my students, don't say the EU like this, which I've done for 20 minutes, but don't say the EU like this, be a bit more precise. I think in that respect, it's really the reputation of the EU, this supranational, or I mean, not supranational in that case, but this institution that has many faces. Within the EU, when we look at the dynamics between Commission, ECDC, EMA, there used to be a bit of beef between EMA and ECDC, tiny bits. About vaccination, actually. I didn't have much time to dive into this. It used to be after H1N1 because ECDC is about public health. So it's about telling you, oh, this is the priority, you should do that, you should do that. And then there's EMA. They're telling you, these are the risks for the priority groups you've been talking about, and maybe it's not so good to publicize this right now. So there was this kind of thing going on 10 years ago. These days, it's really different. I think also when we look at ECDC and the Commission, which are the ones the most involved with HSC and those kind of things. EMA is very important, but EMA does its own thing. ECDC and Commission, I see there are so much hand in hand. You will see praise for the ECDC in the HSC, for instance, sometimes. But who's gaining this? Is it the ECDC or the EU as a whole? I think the satisfaction of the members in the Health Security Committee is very important at the end of the day. Whether it comes from ECDC or the Commission, it doesn't matter that much. If you talk about, if you talk about HERA, do you talk about the Commission? Or do you talk about DG Santé or HERA, and that's it? And it's the same thing, but I think that the question is super important, and with more time and space in the paper, I can definitely discuss this, and I think it's very important here.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So it seems to, the point that you're making that I think makes most sense is that it depends on the audience, right? So if we're saying the audience are the member states, then do the member states, again, that's quite unitary, but the guys that are sitting on the HSC, for instance, I think you're right, they probably just see the people who are not from a member state and consider that in a relatively unitary, do these guys look like they know what they're doing? Are they projecting a sense of competence about what's going on here? Are we grossly offended by what they're suggesting and it stamps all over our autonomy, or are we okay generally with what they're putting forward and what they're proposing to act upon? So that sort of audience perspective is maybe the helpful way to think about it. It depends how the member says. If the audience was the general public, then maybe that would make it slightly different. Or if the audience was even between the institution. So like I know you've done work before on ECDC and EMA and how they work together or don't work together in particular circumstances, and that's maybe where the sort of disjuncture in terms of one body's reputation going up and another's struggling against that or something might come more into play. But perhaps the point is if your member states are the audience here, then that's how that would work. Which links to another question I had, which is about what's the alternative? So if the member states are sitting in the HSC looking at the representative from the ECDC and the representative from the Commission, and they're not satisfied with what they see and they don't feel that these guys know what they're doing, what's the alternative? Who are the sort of competitors to or the rivals to the EU when it's building its reputation in vaccine? Would they turn to the WHO? Would they turn to their own national public health systems? Like what's the competitor system?
So I'm going to start with WHO, actually. There's been a long division in 20 years now, a division in Europe between WHO Europe, which is actually mostly dealing with non-EU countries, and the ECDC, which, working with the WHO has taken over a lot of things that WHO will do in other parts of Europe. So there is already a good division of the turf, the literal turf, actually, territorial turf of those two agencies. I do not believe that if a member state is unhappy with what is suggested, in terms of cooperation at the EU level, they will reach out to the WHO. I really don't think so. We've seen member states such as Hungary actually not not saying anything, by the way, in those meetings. From what I know, I was not in those meetings, of course, but not really saying anything, but eventually not participating in the coordination. In those cases, what you do, in the case of Hungary, you go look for Russia, apparently, because you're going to get the Sputnik vaccine. You might want to have the Chinese vaccine. So you're going to look for other powers. And I would say that it's the same when we look at the big geopolitical narrative about vaccine, that someone's got to write at some point that what happened in 2021 was a weird public health war at some point. We need to talk about this, and we know that even though there were competitors such as the UK and the US on the market, there are still not the same kind of competitors than Russia and China. But first of all, because we're not buying the same vaccines, but also we are not proposing a very different model at the end of the day in the EU. So competitors for the EU, the true competition is Euroscepticism, refusal to coordinate. You have it, I mean, however you want to put it. But there is no specific, I would say, institution that would be replacing it, which actually matters a lot, because one of the big teachings of the literature on reputation is uniqueness. If somebody can do what you do, yeah, it's not going to work out. You're going to cannibalize each other.
That's really interesting. So is the example that you mentioned about Hungary then, would that be an example of the negative case, if you like, where reputation has failed clearly in the Hungarians' eyes? They don't, for whatever reason, think the EU is a viable, and coordination at the EU level was a viable way to go, so they've gone somewhere else. Is that a negative case in this model?
Well, I wouldn't exactly define it this way. The negative case would be the Commission tries, the Commission fails. Basically, that would be the negative. You see, like that would be a better qualifier, because the case at the end of the day is really defined by the fact that there's an agent trying to use reputation. That's the way I see it. However, it's I would go as far as saying it's not a failure of reputation. I don't know how to convince Orban. You see what I mean? Like, it could be the president of the Commission could demonstrate superpowers, and Orban would still not be into it, I believe. So that's not a failure of reputation in itself. But I think this is also an important way to clarify it.
It's a special case for sure, and one where you would need some fairly exclusive interview data to manage to establish exactly what it was that caused those particular countries not to involve in the coordination. Okay, I'm going to ask one more, and then I'll open it up for questions at the floor. And that one more is, if you're looking ahead to sort of what's coming over the next however long a time span you choose to engage in, what are the reputational risks here? So if the Commission's done fairly well so far in building up a reputation in this area, what risks does it face in the period that's coming up?
Yeah, so in my opinion, it has mostly to do with financing. Yeah, the reputation of specifically the Commission is not too bad with pharmaceuticals. That works well. There is a chance that this relationship is not rose and wonderful forever. The fact that, however, they got one of the big negotiators was actually Thierry Breton, who was actually, yeah, that helped a lot. I think that helped a lot, rather than to have the health commissioner as, just sole driver. So this is definitely a risk. There, in terms of reputational risks in the future, if we have had a couple of changes, but if things remain the same, if we have a redo of the teams, right? That's not going to work out. That's not going to work out, because this is not good enough. And basically, declarations of goodwill, and this is also the problem with the reputation. Oh, member states thinks it's awesome. Oh, the Commission seems motivated. Yes, but it we need to translate in more formal legal changes. And I think if the EU is not able to carry over, because I talked about Act 1 and Act 2 of the health European Health Union, we need Act 3, 4, 5. I'm fine with a decision, a regulation a year. That's good enough. But they need to keep on rolling it, because we've seen that goes really fast after a pandemic. Actually, we've seen that in the last decade.
Okay, so there's a momentum issue. You're saying it has to be built into the, okay, that's a bit, we could pick up on the health union point and where that's going and treaty changes and things as well. But I want to open up the floor. If anybody's got a question and want to raise a hand and come on the mic or the camera or pop something in the chat box, which I'm just going to check. Typing. Oh, Rita has a question. Rita, go ahead if you're able to. Super. There you are. We can't hear you, Rita, although you don't appear to be on mute, which is strange. I wonder if your mic's attached to that headset that you had on before. No, that's all right, don't worry.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We now enter the new crisis, the war in Ukraine, with the problem of the gas prices. And the Belgian Prime Minister last week, he suggested as an option for the problem of the prices to have a joint procurement of gas at European level, referring to the successful vaccination procurement. Would you consider this as a success of the reputational approach? And do you see other have there been similar joint procurement examples in other fields at European level, or would you see it being used as a template in the future in other fields within public health or outside public health?
Great question. Thank you, Rita. Thibaud, do you want to just take that one and then I'll gather some from the chat?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Rita. It's a success. Then it works. Joint procurement. I mean, who knew that the European Commission, who built a market, was the best to buy on it? Who knew that? That's insane, isn't it? But I think it's actually quite a good use if it works in public health with coordinating competences. I do not see why it wouldn't work in most things, to be honest. At the end of the day, it's just mandating someone to buy in bulk from the point of view of member states. So I think we're going to see that happening. I don't know too much about the context of energy policy, but I was actually kind of, I was expecting someone's like, where would you see that happen? I was like, I guess energy would work. And apparently I agree with the PM in Belgium. So that's terrific. Other fields beyond gas and energy in general. If I told you that it had been used for masks in early 2020, you wouldn't have believed me before that. So we don't know. Maybe one day we'll need to, I don't know, buy water, because this is also a resource that is problematic in some parts of Europe. Maybe we'll need to do that. I don't know. But joint procurement is really not complicated to put together. They did it relatively easily after H1N1. They just didn't use it. And as soon as they needed to use it, it was done. It was really, really, really fast. They bought ventilators early 2020. They bought masks, PPE in general, and that worked. So yeah, that's a big thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
I think this point about the breaking of the glass ceiling is probably the relevant one, right? Once you've done this thing and it works well, it seems like I'm wondering about medical devices, because we're about to move medical devices onto a similar sort of regulatory platform that we use for pharmaceuticals, which then logically might be another area that might spill over, but let's see. I'm going to do one question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
They did it with ventilators, actually. They bought ventilators.
Oh, sure, yes. Yeah, good. As a crisis-led example of that. I guess I was thinking more long-term about the sort of non-crisis type medical devices where we're about to, as I understand it, though I'm not a lawyer, move to a sort of similar regulatory system under crisis scenarios than we would do with pharmaceuticals. There's a hand up from Charlotte, but I'm just going to pick up on a question in the chat first, because it ties very closely to a little bit to what I was less eloquently asking before, about the extent to which an increase in reputation or a building of reputation within the ECDC or the EMA reduces influence of national public health institutions. Like it's very close to this question I had about whether if you increase reputation in one organisation, that comes at a cost to other organisations because of this uniqueness point you're making, I suppose.
I'm reading the follow-up question of the same.
Okay.
I would say, to be a bit corny, reputation is like love. You don't have to divide it. You can have it for many things at the end of the day. I mean, this is not something. There's not a finite amount of good reputation, because now we're really talking about good reputation. Yes, we have wonderful agencies across the EU, national agencies that are indeed very old in some cases. When we talk about Brexit, for instance, the fact that we lost the British agency is a terrible thing. That's for sure. But here, the whole point is not to take over. It's not a CDC situation, for instance, or we're not in those US contexts. It's really about synergy. There are many things that agencies do that is useful to the ECDC, and it's really a two-level thing at the end of the day, with a lot of caution not to step over the national level on the side of the EU, to be honest. Because they could be more pushy about some things, at least I believe, and they don't, and it's a choice which I think pays over the long term. So when especially when we look at seminal publications, that's not really the case anymore, but 2011, these kind of things, we find actually the health agency in the UK, we find not the Goethe Institute, oh my god, the German Institute. We find all those we find all those big national agencies that are really able to contribute and to think about what the CDC should do and how to do it. Finally, when we talk about EU agencies, most EU agencies are based on networks, which is why I said, as usual, it starts with a network. Then the network is often integrated, but also becomes part of the governing bodies. And when you talk about the ECDC, well, you have to also talk about the member states that are in it. When you talk about EMA, you have also to talk about the member states that are in it. EFSA, it's another story, but member states are in it. So same thing, yeah, indeed, it actually gives even more to think about, because when you talk about those, I think we really need to think in terms of level, which is why I was defending this idea that the EU carves a role for itself, because this is a whole new level that is created, rather than just sort of like almost petty things happening between institutions. The CDC, EMA, the Commission, they do something that public health agencies in member states are not able to do at the end of the day.
There's an interesting link to a publication that I haven't read that's in that chat, if anybody wants to have a look at it. And that's an interesting line of debate that I'm not familiar with, about the notion that EU agencies might have pushed out or even had a role in abolishing national public health institutes. It's not a line of argument I'm familiar with, but there's a really helpful reference in the chat. So thank you for posting that. Charlotte, you had a question. There you are.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I want to pick up on the multi-level nature of the issues that we've been discussing, and in particular also pick up on your answer to Rita's question, thinking about the EU's role in vaccination and ambition at the global health level, so internationally and externally as well. And I'm wondering whether there is a kind of a zero-sum game between the internal actions, such as advanced purchasing agreements, and what it does internally for ensuring supply of vaccines for member states and EU citizens, with sort of global solidarity, COVAX, and so on, and whether that's inevitably in conflict or whether that could be somehow reconciled, or kind of what's your take on those kind of two dynamics, external, internal, if you will.
So thank you for this. I think, however, my take might be less informed than yours, Charlotte, on the matter, because you know quite a bit about this. At the end of the day, I remember, for instance, so when I was talking about this the AstraZeneca problem. And the AstraZeneca problem was actually solved even before AstraZeneca gave the shots. It was a purchase of 1.8 billion doses, I think, something. And then AstraZeneca gave all those doses. And the EU is not keeping those doses. The EU is, for instance, distributing them. I think we have. I'm really not that well informed regarding this, but I think there is. I do not see how this would be so problematic to have those two goals at the same time. The policy objective that I heard from the beginning is we do what we can here first, and then. And it's not and then that is hermetic, of course. It's not like, and in 2 years, once we're done. No, it's really, we do what we can here. So I think it's, I want to be a bit positive about this, but maybe it's just blissful ignorance. I don't know. But I don't think it's that problematic. I think on the contrary, it can carry the voice outside. You were talking about the Gavi, and I was looking into this big project between Gavi and many others actually, and also international organizations trying to bring that together. I think the participation, you don't need the participation of the EU. First of all, you have other instances to help with that. That's what I believe. But also when you look at the EU in public health on the global stage is much better at doing exchange of practices, which sometimes is actually like highly valued. There is the acronym is escaping my mind right now, but there is something terrific happening when it comes to antimicrobial resistance, where you have those agencies that indeed are small compared to the big giants in the US. They are meeting with the US agencies, with the Canadian agencies, Japanese agencies to discuss AMR. I think this could be possible, but now let's compare a bit reputation. Is the EU actually the best one to do that? There are many people who want to do this, many institutions that are really able to do it, let them do it. Then on AMR, where a lot of people actually, now it's getting better, but a lot of people don't really care about this. Well, we have a more minor actor on the global stage that is able to actually deal with this. So I think maybe it's a bit too big for the EU on the global stage. And there are so many battles to have right now. And I would rather, but now I will sound like someone who's not interested in the outside world, but I would rather them to tackle vaccine hesitancy right now than to add this, even though it's already on their plate, but to add this to their plate. I think Gavi indeed and the World Health Organization are doing great things already.
That ties quite nicely to another question that's in the chat, or a follow-up question in the chat about the EU's role in this shift from sort of national to transnational governance of health issues, and where the EU fits in to that, particularly on vaccine strategies. I wonder if, because I wanted to close by just returning, if there aren't any other questions. I can't see any hands up, but give me a wave if there are other questions. I wanted to close by returning to the health union and your reflections on how the EU's process of building its reputation in this area is materializing in or feeding into the health union, and what you might expect to see, whether you might expect to see treaty change, is that feasible or possible, or whether this sort of softer commission decision type approach is more likely. What are your thoughts about that going forward?
No, so I will preface with the idea that if they don't do something to explain to us really what's the European Health Union soon, there will be a reputational damage. I think that's that. I think really, because in 2020 we're told that this is something. It's just for the future, right? We have the first steps, but this is for the future. And then in 2020, and that was the State of the Union speech. It's 2020, first State of the Union speech. Of course, you know, we're going to talk a lot about health. And then I was eagerly waiting for the second State of the Union speech by von der Leyen in 2021. And there was literally one paragraph about this, and I was shocked, really. And that was phrased extremely weirdly. That was phrased, and it was so. And now we have done the European Health Union because we have HERA. What are you talking about, really? Then, as I was doing some field work with people working, especially people in national capitals, they were telling me that no, actually, this is really not the end of the story. It's just that right now they cannot really talk about it. There is also an issue with financing. Actually, there are some things that need to wait, especially when it comes to the qualitative leap that was done. That was prepared in 2020. So agencies, some of them have received new tasks, but they don't have received the financing. They haven't received the financing yet. So it's still, it's still waiting. But just a clear message to let us know what is going on. What are you going to do? I think if you want to be ambitious, you got to change the treaty. Yeah, you got to change the treaty. I would love for this to be advertised as the health treaty, because it would be an amending treaty. You can call it the health treaty. There is no, to me, at the end of the day, the political problem is not that important. That could be very, very beneficial. We know that there are plenty of people also that are really pushing for this at the moment. Apparently relatively successful way. Apparently they are talking to a lot of people. The big question will be like the shape of it. I do not think we should go through the conference for the future of Europe. I think this is a lawyer's debate, and it's a very simple change to the treaty at the end of the day. It's not that complicated to enforce. To prepare. Not that complicated to enforce either, I think. So I think, they have to announce. They have to capitalize on what they have right now, and they need to declare it. There was a bit of teasing that was done in 2020. A journalist had asked actually the person from the commission, I don't remember exactly who was actually talking in this press conference, and it's like, will you require a change of the treaty? And a wonderful commission answer was, if there needs to be a change in the treaty, member states will decide a change in the treaty. It's like, okay. I guess a change of the treaty would be nice. I believe so.
Okay, that's a good answer. I may have opened more questions than we've addressed at the Health Union, but I think it's kind of unavoidable, and I appreciate your views. We have finished nice and squarely on time, which is a testament to our self-control. So thank you once again, Thibaud, for joining us and for that really fascinating presentation. Thank you everybody for questions in the chat and on the videos. We do not have another seminar organised just yet. We'll probably wait until a bit later in the year for that, but you can keep in touch with the network on Twitter and on the mailing list and on the website. There'll be a recording of this seminar that goes up on the website very shortly, so keep an eye out, and we're very happy to hear from you with suggestions for other events. If people have work they'd like to present or things that they'd like to see talked about, then drop us a line and let us know, and we'll happily try and accommodate that. But for now, thanks very much everybody for coming, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.